Hello and welcome to Run It Back on the Raptors Republic Network. I'm your host, Zulfi Sheikh, and I'm not here joined by Kyle Ramnarine. Instead, we are lucky enough to have Cody Wiles joining us again, co-hosting with me. That's right, Kyle is taking a well-deserved break, spending some time with his fam, so I got Cody here to help me out here to recap another slate of Raptors basketball. Now, a lot has happened in this past week. Some good and some pretty bad, to be quite honest. So we're going to dive into all of it. But with that being said, let's run it back. Like always, we're going to start by recapping this past week's action, and we begin with the good. Going back to last Monday, the Raptors embarked on their, let me check my notes, fifth attempt at a pizza party, and by God, were they determined to get it. The Raptors were flowing all night, doing exactly what they needed to do on both ends of the floor. On offense, Toronto shot 55% from the field, 43% from three, and they were proving a point most people know. Indiana is not a good defensive team. Barnes finished with a triple-double via 21 points, 12 rebounds, 12 assists, and 5 blocks. He's now tied for the second most trip dubs in franchise history and the only Raptor to record 4 triple-doubles in one season. Shout out Scottie. Meanwhile, RJ Barrett and Quickly added 24 and 19 points respectively, while rookie Grady Dick earned himself the post-game win chain by dropping 18 points off the bench, looking real comfortable while doing it, and most importantly, going 4 for 4 from downtown. Toronto also limited Halliburton to just 9 points on 2 of the 11 shooting, which was impressive. And if it weren't for Siakam's 27 and Matherin's career-high tying 34 points, he hit some absolutely ridiculous shots, by the way, like some real heat check stuff. The Raptors would have probably been ordering pizza a lot sooner. Either way, the team took care of business and got to celebrate a 3-game win streak in style when things were all said and done, a 130-122 win.
The season, a lot of guys were not here, but I promised whenever we win three games in a row that I'm gonna buy dinner. Somebody said pizza party. That's a little bit like, you know, we're gonna wrap it up a little bit. We're gonna get some nice food. Okay. With further ado, great contribution tonight goes to Grady Dick.
One, two, three.
Working off the high of a pizza-induced euphoria, the Raptors returned home for a 4-game homestand against the Dallas Mavericks. Luka, Kyrie, and the Mavs were on the second night of a back-to-back, and it was also Doncic's 25th birthday. So maybe they were out partying and a bit tired, but you wouldn't have known it with how things underwent at Scotiabank Arena. It was a back-and-forth contest throughout the first half, as both squads traded blows, making runs one after another. And that was despite Luka doing some truly insane stuff only he could possibly do. 1 second, he's throwing an effortless no-look dime that no one really saw developing other than himself. And the next minute, he's completely fooling the Raptors defense with ball fakes and getting some easy baskets. Doncic went on to have a birthday triple-double by way of 30 points, 11 rebounds, and 16 assists. And throughout all that, the Raptors still led by a point at halftime. But the third quarter, which has truly not been kind to the Raptors this season, is where things began to slip away. Despite Toronto being the more rested team, they really lacked energy coming out of the break, and the Mavericks made them pay for it. The Raptors were outscored 40-25 in the frame, and things really felt out of hand from that point. In the fourth, Kyrie Irving really sealed the deal, scoring 15 of his 29 points in the final frame, and Toronto's core trio did put up a spirited effort, to be fair. IQ finished with 28, 9, and 5. Barrett added 26, and Scottie had 19, 11, and 7 with 3 blocks. But alas, Doncic and Irving proved too much on that night, and the Raptors' win streak came to an end, 136-125 the final. Now, if one streak ends, it means another can potentially begin, and if the Raptors were going to get pizza party number 2, it would need to start against Steph Curry and the Warriors. Last time these two teams played, it was in Golden State, and the Raptors shellacked the Dubs, but that was without Draymond Green, so we knew this game was probably going to be different. And another point of note, this was also Curry's first time playing in Scotiabank Arena since Game 5 of the 2019 NBA Finals, where the Raptors obviously won a championship. So it's been a long time coming, and it was clear fans in Toronto were eager to see Curry. A lot of number 30 jerseys in the crowd, and plenty of cheering for Wardell throughout the game. Now, if that weren't enough to make circumstances weird, how about the Warriors not getting into town until 7 a.m. the same day due to technical difficulties with their plane after playing in a game the night before in New York? Now, once action did get underway, the Raptors looked solid to start the contest, largely thanks to RJ Barrett. He came out firing, and he seems to really like this matchup against the Warriors. Last time he put up a season-high 37 points, and in this one he would finish with 23 on 9 of 16 shooting, keeping the Raptors close for a bit. But all of that, and I mean all of it, changed midway through the second quarter when Scottie Barnes got hurt. While going up to contest a shot, his hand got caught against Immanuel Quickley's foot, and unfortunately, the Raptors All-Star was immediately in some massive pain and discomfort. He had to go back to the locker room right away and did not return. News came after the game that Barnes broke the third metacarpal in his left hand, and in simpler terms, that's his middle finger. He broke his finger, and he is out indefinitely. No word yet on if he requires surgery or not. Things only got worse from the Raptors from there. Kuminga got to get loose without Barnes as a defender, throwing down some monster dunks, and then that third quarter slump paid for Toronto once again. They got outscored 32-19 in the frame, and the game was basically a wrap after that as the Warriors extended their lead throughout the fourth quarter and picked up a 120-105 victory. That brought us to Sunday night, where the Raptors were taking on Charlotte and having to do it in their first full game without Barnes all season. And if you're wondering how much they were going to miss him, the answer is a lot. Yeah, pretty much. They're going to miss him a lot because Barnes leads the Raptors in every major statistical category on the squad and is the only player in the NBA to do so. And without him, Toronto needed plenty of other guys to step up, like IQ and RJ, but also Ochai Agbaji, who got the start in place of Barnes. And for context, Bruce Brown was out of this game, but Agbaji made the most of the start because he was solid. He showed that he earned the minutes as he was fighting hard on the glass all night with 9 rebounds, eventually even throwing down a massive oop off a nice Pirtle pass from the elbow area, having 13 points to go along with it. Now, the Raptors were a little disjointed throughout this one. In fact, both teams were, as they combined for 19 first-half turnovers. But Toronto leaned heavily on IQ and RJ to lead them, and the duo ended up doing just that to their credit. Quickly finished the game with 22 points and a season-high tying 11 assists, while Barrett added 23 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists. The offense was pretty simple with those two, a lot of drive and kick, getting downhill and dishing it out, and some screening work between Yak and IQ also led to some nice actions as well. And now, speaking of Pirtle, he had to unfortunately leave this game at halftime due to a dislocated pinky, meaning the Raptors had to close out this game more shorthanded, pardon the pun, than they already were. Thankfully, there were enough contributions by the rest of the squad. Gary Trent Jr. added 17, while Grady Dick and Jordan Nwora notched 11 apiece off the bench. Now, speaking of GTJ, he was pretty massive towards the end of this bizarre game. The Raptors went the final 4 minutes without a field goal, while thankfully knocking down some free throws for once. But they were on the verge of allowing overtime after their miscues, and that's when Gary came up huge on defense of all things. He just yoinked the ball out of Vasily Micic's hand, and he jaunted the other way for an easy game-sealing layup. Now, after all of that, the Raptors win their first Scottie-less game and took home a 111-106 dub. All right, to recap all that action, the Raptors went 2-2 over their last 4 games. They're now 23-38, still sitting in 12th in the Eastern Conference and 4 games out of a supposed play-in spot and 10th spot in the East. So, Cody, I guess I want to start with you. I know there's a lot of up and down action, some good and some bad, like I mentioned, but we can't kind of dismiss the fact that the biggest piece of news is Scottie Barnes being injured. He broke his finger, for layman's terms. I guess the technical term was the fourth or third metacarpal in his finger. It's just the middle finger. He broke that. And he is out indefinitely moving forward. They're still trying to figure out if he requires surgery or not. So I guess what I want to ask from you to start this conversation is that we saw how that game against the Warriors went when he went out midway through. And then we got to see a full game without Scottie Barnes against the Hornets and two different kind of teams or two different kind of performances, I'd say, quite honestly. What did you get from this Raptors team kind of coming out of that injury, and what have you seen from them so far?
Yeah, you know what? It's going to be a mishmash, pish-posh, whatever you want to say. They're going to be relying on different people, right? We saw against Charlotte, we saw a fully led Immanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett team for the most part. Jakob Poeltl being hurt in that one as well. Hopefully he's out for a long time. We'll talk about him more later, but it's going to be a bit of a struggle, right? Without Scottie Barnes, he's clearly the best player, right? He's leading basically in every statistical category. The jump he's made this year has been absolutely nothing short of spectacular. So we don't want to speculate, but it's looking like he's going to be out for possibly the rest of the year. The third metacarpal bone, according to Jeff Stotts, the average time lost was 12 games, 31 days for someone who didn't need surgery. For somebody who did need surgery, 18 games, 41 days. Wendell Carter Jr. earlier in the year missed 20 games. So Raptors 21 left now after the Charlotte game. So we'll see what happens. But the Scottie-less stretch has begun, and we're gonna see players get opportunities like, hey, first quarter minutes for DJ Carton and Jordan
Yeah.
Nwora in the Charlotte game. So it's gonna be a lot of Darko Rakovic just trying a whole bunch of different things. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna play like armchair doctor here, but I will say my girlfriend is a nurse, and I do love mentioning that.
Okay.
And she mentioned that, like you said, based on those numbers, it's around 6 weeks, which is kind of a
Yeah.
modest projection. And the Raptors have 6 weeks left in their season, like you said, 21 games. So surgery or not, the likelihood of Scottie returning is very low. And the more these games go on, the further we get into the end of the season, the less likely it is that he plays, to be quite honest. Because if he comes back with 3 games remaining, really, what's the point in that at that point? So it's going to be interesting. We'll get into what we think of Scottie's season, but I want to go back to, you talked about it. The offense is going to be a bit of mishmash, whatever you want to call it. And Darko Rakovic, like he's had to do all season, is just having to figure out a different rotation, throwing guys together, doing what he can do to try to get some kind of semblance of chemistry out of this team. And you saw with this game against the Hornets, the most recent one, it was a lot of what I found was like simplifying the offense, especially in the second half. A lot of just drive and kick, a little pick and roll. But the main part was that he was letting Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett kind of commandeer and control the offense, which I think makes a lot of sense. And for them, the way it worked was they're just going to simplify and play to the strengths. Do you like how that worked? Do you think it's something they can continue to do down the stretch, or do you want to see a bit more variability there?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Zulfi. That's something that is going to carry this offense, is the pick and roll between Emmanuel Quickley and Jakob Poeltl. For the most part, like Poeltl has been so valuable to Quickley's growth as he comes into more of a point guard here. Like he's been asked to play a different type of role with Toronto, right, than he was asked to be in New York. Like they want him to be more of a point guard. And hey, season high 11 assists against Charlotte. He's done that in back-to-back games now with 11. Sixth game with 10 plus assists this season. He only had 4 total 10 plus assists in his first 3 NBA seasons combined. So he's slowly starting to come along. And with this last stretch here, he's going to get a real opportunity to explore more of that on-ball creation just with Scottie being out. But you hit the nail on the head. The pick and roll, driving kick. We got Grady and Derry out there. It's going to be different for sure without Scottie, but Darko Rakovic, let's see, he's more known as an offensive guy, so let's see what he can do when, the superstar goes down.
Yeah, like it's interesting because like with Scottie there, obviously this team is better and the options are so much more limitless. Again, like IQ can become an off-ball creator like he has been, kind of working off Scottie, but they can also be that playmaker, facilitator when he's running those bench units. It's a bit of back and forth. But now with Scottie Barnes out, they kind of have to simplify, but in a way, it's forcing these guys to now have to develop the main areas of their game. Like, again, like you said, Emmanuel Quickley has grown so much with Jakob Poeltl as a pick and roll partner, but now he has no choice but to keep doing that because now he doesn't have the option of working off with Scottie Barnes and still going back to his comfort zone, which is playing off ball more often. And we're seeing him develop, like you said, back-to-back games with 11 assists. And he's doing it in the way, like I've been talking about, like I wrote about, like he's going score first. He started off super aggressive, scorching, throwing up the ball. I think he had 10 points after the first quarter and a bit. And then off of that, he started working a lot more with the passing game, that driving kick. He's kind of added to his game this whole wraparound pass thing, especially from the left side that I really like. And he's doing that more and more comfortably. And I think that's what's going to happen down the stretch here. They're just going to get comfortable in doing the things that they kind of have, well, no other choice but to do, to be quite honest with you. So it's going to be interesting to see that part. I think we both agree there. The other thing I wanted to ask you is Ochai Agbaji. We saw he's the one who got the start in place of Scottie Barnes. He had a pretty good game, 13 points, 9 rebounds, pretty close to double-double. Would have been the first of his career, I believe. First time he started since, I think, December when he was with the Utah Jazz. So it was interesting to kind of see him kind of thrust into that role. Maybe not the person we all expected, but with Bruce Brown being out in this game as well, that may have played a part in it. But I think he lived up to the occasion as much as you could, replacing the gargantuan, gap that Scottie Barnes left. But he was in there, he played to his role, and he kept it simple. Do you think he's the guy that they should continue with going forward, at least for the foreseeable future? Or is there another player that you think probably could get an opportunity in that spot as well?
If I was to put money on it, I would have thought Grady Dick was going to get the start. I think Grady's been unbelievable. I think we share that sentiment. But you mentioned it. He stepped up. And man, he is just so athletic. Like he's flying over dudes for rebounds. You mentioned career high in rebounds tonight, one shy of a double-double. He's flying over dudes for oops. Like I remember a play specifically against Charlotte tonight. Jakob Poeltl catching it off the short roll, throwing up to Ochai, and he just I can't remember who he soared over, but he comes down with it. If he can continue to bring this athleticism to Toronto, like that is something that you could really see viable in the starting lineup. They need to keep challenging him to be a point of attack defender. We saw against Golden State, he was like face guarding Steph for a little bit when he was on the floor, and not the best shooting night from three, but he's had a game previous where he's hit 4 or 5. He just needs to keep developing really to become that 3-and-D role, and he can become a player in a rotation for a team that's trying to compete for a championship. But I don't mind the start. I thought it was going to be Grady, but they gave it to Ochai and he ran with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably expected it would have been Grady Dick. Like you said, he's been playing really well, shooting over 50% from the field since he's been back, 40% from three. He's been amazing. We'll get into that, I'm sure. But I think like Darko's also made it very clear that he wants to keep this bench unit intact as much as possible. Obviously, with Jakob also getting hurt and Bruce Brown, that changed things in the second half against Charlotte quite a bit. But for the most part, he's talked about wanting to keep that bench unit together as much as possible, which is why he'd rather throw Ochai in versus Grady. And I don't mind that. The thing I found interesting is that, like you mentioned, Ochai's athleticism and kind of the way he can operate makes you kind of think he can, like, to some degree, estimate a bit of what Scottie Barnes has to do out there. Obviously, Scottie does so much more in terms of his playmaking and how he operates and facilitates. But like you even saw it early in this game, the way they got that first basket, they kind of ran that similar play, an IQ Jakob Poeltl pick and roll. Scottie Barnes goes in, he seals off. I said Scottie Barnes. Ochai Agbaji seals off, gets a basket. Even like working off the lob, that athleticism kind of allows him to play in that similar role and kind of be that guy that can kind of be a glue person and a connector out there. So no, he's not going to be Scottie Barnes, but if you can plug into that spot and kind of provide at least that part of the game a little bit, that athleticism, that bounce, a strong rebounder, like you said, work on being a point of attack defender. I think like we mentioned it before when he was brought here, and what we're going to be seeing a lot is that like guys will have no choice but to grow. They're going to be given more responsibility. Part of why they even traded for Ochai was to give him greater responsibility, and now he's going to have no choice by forcing him to start and going out there defending some of the best players on the other teams and having to do more offensively. I think like I don't want to say it's a blessing in disguise, but maybe a silver lining to the idea of Scottie Barnes being injured is that these guys are going to have to do these things, not just your number 1 and 2 guys in RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly, but also the depth pieces like a Grady Dick, like a Ochai Agbaji, like we saw tonight. So I think it'll be good in the long run in terms of development, because that's what's going to be the biggest priority for the team here. But I guess kind of jumping off that, kind of taking it back a step, I want to know, like, who do you think needs to step up the most in the absence of Scottie Barnes? Like, there's a lot of candidates out there, obviously. Like you said, Ochai Agbaji is the guy replacing Scottie Barnes in the starting lineup, as we can see. But there's obviously your leaders in Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett. One game sample against Charlotte looked pretty good. They were both operating as well, clunky at times. I think the word I like to use was disjointed, but they got the job done at the end of the day. Who do you think needs to be that person to really step up the most in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be Emmanuel Quickly, right? I mean, they brought this guy in to be that secondary creator and to carry a heavy load offensively. So when the main guy in Scottie goes out, you're hoping Quickly can step up. He's had a good week this past week. 20 points, 8 assists, 5.5 rebounds, only 36% from three, but he has some stuff to improve on, and I'd like to see that down the stretch. We've seen this past week, he's struggled against a bit bigger and physical guards. We saw against Golden State, Moses Moody did a pretty good job on him. Josh Green in Dallas, Andrew Nembhard in Indiana. He's struggling to get around these guys, to get downhill, to create some separation. So I'd really like to see him, as you mentioned, silver lining, like grow in that area of his game, because that's something that we're going to need. They're going to need alongside Scottie in the future. So as you mentioned, everybody's role is going to be different. Emmanuel Quickly now is going to be first on the scouting report, probably. It's either him or RJ Barrett, but we need the perimeter creation. So it'll be interesting to see how Quickly steps up as really the number 1 option of the team.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think like maybe spiritually or like symbolically, RJ Barrett might be the one to like step up, the hometown kid. He's obviously probably a more vocal guy out there, a more emphatic personality. But Emmanuel Quickly, in terms of the X's and O's and on the basketball court, he's going to be like the main operator for this team offensively, pretty much 99% of the time with Scottie Barnes out. And you don't really have that bench point guard. You talked about DJ Carden's getting minutes in this game because they don't have a backup point guard really in this situation. And then you don't have a guy like Bruce Brown who's meant to be this backup ball handler for you. So now a lot of it is going to fall on the shoulders of Manny quickly. I think the thing that speaks to me most, and we even saw it before Scottie Barnes went out, is just how much Darko Rajakovic is going up to him and talking to him during games and just trying to communicate things, have him understand what he wants offensively, what the goals of the game are. And I think for him, it's going to be just picking out how to do these things and deal with all the challenges of being a lead guard. There's no better way to really do it in the league or in any situation rather than just being thrown into the fire. And he's being given like this controlled environment to do it, which I think is really good for his game and which is good for his growth. So yeah, you're right. Especially against those larger guards, like how are you going to deal with that? What are your counters going to be? Is it going to be finding that a way to get your perimeter shots off through screen game, to work off ball a bit? Or are you going to find ways to penetrate, keep that dribble alive, getting inside? I know a big conversation with him has been is like, don't pick up that dribble too early. You can still be really effective with that live ball dribble, but you're right. Those bigger guards are challenging him and it's making it hard for him to do that because he is an undersized guard at the end of the day. So what is he going to be able to do to counter that? That's the question for him. And I think this stretch towards the end of the season without Scottie Barnes is going to force him to find a bit of that answer. And hopefully we get to see it. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they adapt as a team. And I guess going off of that, I'd love to know, like, what's your outlook on the rest of the season? Let's assume for the purpose of this question that Scottie Barnes is out for the rest of the year, which it seems like it likely that he is. Like,
right.
Do you have any sense of optimism with what they can do? Do you think it's kind of just like, let's talk about development, let's not talk about wins and losses? Like, where is your outlook on the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, this could probably be tied into like the keep the pick / convey the pick conversation because it's all about development, right? Like I've been of the camp, like I don't care if they get the pick this year, if they give it away, just as long as internal development is what's happening. And even if, okay, I'll just transition this to the keep the pick, convey the pick. I know it's been a large topic. Even if they get into the top 6, I think it's around a 50% chance if they end up being like the 6th worst team, which is probably where they could end up. Best case scenario for the keep the pick crowd. They're 3 games ahead of Memphis for the bottom 6. But hopefully Jakob Poeltl isn't out for a longer term thing because that could play a role into it. But 15 of their final 21 games are against teams over 500. So regardless, this group of guys without Scottie is going to be challenged against some decent teams here. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these guys kind of come together and play their new roles against good teams because they're going to be challenged down the stretch here.
Yeah, I think the point you raised that was interesting is the fact that like being in the top 6 doesn't really guarantee you anything. Like you really have to get into that top 4 to feel good about keeping this pick in the top 6. Like you said, it's around a 50% chance. And we've seen in recent years in draft history, tons of teams have been left over in that lottery when it comes to like picking. So it's not really a guarantee. And trust me, I've said this before, trying to out-tank some of these teams at the bottom is a damn near impossible task. Memphis keeps losing. They just lost to Portland the other day, and I'm pretty sure they lost again after that. So it's going to be really hard to catch them. We obviously have the Wizards at the bottom, the Pistons, and I just don't think it's going to be a simple enough task. Like, yeah, you're right. It's 15 out of the 21 games against winning teams. So there's a world if Jakob Poeltl gets hurt, people are saying, like, you know what, just call it a day, fold. But this team also has shown they play better against teams with winning records. Their record against over 500 teams is better than under 500 teams because they like to compete. Sometimes they play down to their competition, which is part of that. But I think they've shown they have a resiliency. And I think I'm in the camp with you where it's like, live with the results of whatever happens and just try your best to develop this team as much as possible. And Darko Rajakovic has mentioned it. Part of what we think development is being competitive. Like it's hard to really look at a guy's play and say he's developing well when they're getting beat down by 30. Just ask the Detroit Pistons. I don't know how much Monty Williams is saying his team is developing all that much. Or Cade Cunningham is. So I think part of that is like staying competitive is part of the development angle and kind of learning how to play together as a team. If you're learning and developing together, well, then likely the results are looking better too. And I think the interesting caveat I want to add to this is the fact that like maybe you don't get that pick and you convey it. Next year's draft is probably stronger, and that's positive side. But there's also the fact that you have Indiana's pick. Currently, it's sitting at 15. Indiana slides, which they have been, that could be a lottery pick for you. Now, I know there's an argument just for some people to be like, oh, well, what about 2 lottery picks in this draft? That would be awesome. Well, then, like the Raptors have already said, they don't intend on making plenty of picks in this draft. Masai said it when he had 3 first-round picks, so I doubt he'd really care about that. But the idea is, like, I think they're in a good enough situation, given they already have that 15th overall pick. Maybe it goes to 17, maybe it goes higher. So just live with the results. Go out, compete, play hard. Maybe it gets you into the play and maybe it doesn't. But either way, you're in a good spot. You're going to have a relatively decent draft pick and you're going to be able to move on with some development, which is, I think, a nice way to look at it. I think you and I agree on that sentiment for the most part versus the outright tank crowd. So I think it'll be interesting to see. My favorite part is that this conversation isn't going away anytime soon, I don't think. If every win and every loss is going to shift the odds one way or another, and it's going to make people go even crazier about, like, look, we should tank, look, we should compete. I think when it comes to the end of the season, what I'm assuming is going to be an interesting part is, say the Raptors do fight for a play-in spot or, like, pursue that, and then they end up with, like, the 8th pick or something. So they give it to San Antonio, they go through the plane and they don't win anything. That's going to lead to a whole lot of I told you so's from people being like, look, we should have tanked. We didn't really get anything out of it. I think it just, like, your point that you made, Cody, was like, it all just depends on your perspective, right? Like, if you're focused on development and looking at that in terms of, like, just how the players come together, I think that'll mean more in that sense than just looking at it like, oh, a pick or not. I think will be kind of like the way I want to look at it. So it'll be interesting. But I guess the last thing I want to touch on between this conversation is Scottie Barnes. He's probably going to be out, like we talked about. If this is the end of his season, how do you, like, remember it? How are you going to talk about this season? Year number 3, the leaps that he made, first time All-Star. Like, if you have to encapsulate, what are you going to think about with the season with Scottie Barnes?
The All-Star jump. I think, like, if this is a chapter in Scottie Barnes's career as a book, it's the All-Star jump. Unfortunately, in his last game, he got only 10 points, so it dropped his point total to 19.9. Just my OCD just hates that. But 19.9 points. He had 15.3 last year, 6.1 assists this year, 4.8 last year, 8.2 rebounds last year, 6.6. I can keep going on because every single number is literally better. He improved the leaps and bounds, and he's the best player on the team by far. The most important and like almost shocking growth has been the 3-point shot and the defense. From going from 28% from threes and the 2.9 attempts last season to almost 5 this year on 34%, he's basically become a league average, if not a little bit better per se, 3-point shooter. And that is something that would have been a distant memory last year. And then the defense, we saw him really come into his own as a weak side help rim protector, just constantly pinning blocks off the backboard. They even asked him to do a little bit more on-ball defense, and he was able to do that as well. Just a phenomenal season from Scottie. Hopefully he can come back from this injury. It sucks that it ended like this because he was having a fantastic season, obviously making his first All-Star team, gave something for Raptors fans to watch on All-Star weekend with him being an injury replacement. But it's been a great season. I did not see this jump coming from him so early. So it's been a great season from Scottie. It's unfortunate that it ended like this, however.
Yeah, I think you encapsulated it well. Just like the leap was unprecedented. I don't think anyone expected it to be to that extent. And the way I want to, like, talk about it is the fact that, like, I want to remind people just how much he really had to go through in this season as well. Again, you have one of your best friends and teammates in OG Anunoby, this 3-and-D wing defender, this point of attack guy who allows you to be this weak side help defender for the most part. He's gone. So then you're asked to be more of a point of attack guy. Okay, cool. You still have Pascal there, your ISO ball scorer who can attack off counters for you when things are getting, like, messy and grinded out. He's the guy who can go get you a bucket. All right, Pascal Siakam trade. Now, Scottie, the entire show is yours. You have to figure it out now. That's enough in and of itself. And throughout all of that, he continued to get better. He started off with a strong 3-point shooting. He eventually got even more comfortable, like, scoring inside the arc. He got way more comfortable operating both as a pick and roll creator, both off the ball and kind of just moving and facilitating. And I think just all the areas like you talked about, statistically, he's improved across the board. He's the best player on the team, statistically speaking. But just the fact that he had to do it throughout all this change and all these obstacles, I think makes me incredibly optimistic for the future. I especially love, again, like you mentioned, defensively. I think there's such a future there for him as a weak side and a help defender, just as that back line. He is so freakishly athletic the amount he can just get up on these blocks is always so impressive to me. I'll never not be amazed by what he can do, especially the corner threes that he always somehow finds a way to in blocks. His timing on those is impeccable. And I just want to continue to see that. Having guys like Ochai and Emmanuel quickly get better as being on-ball defenders is only going to allow Scottie to do even more of that. And just like, again, having a full season next year, hopefully, of Scottie being able to be that guy, that facilitator who can work with bench units, work with the starters, and just connect these lineups so fluidly, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. But yeah, I think the main thing is like, he's proven, I think, unequivocally in my mind, that he is a franchise cornerstone. On the court, he has shown the fact that he can be that central piece for a team looking to figure it out and reset. And he's also grown so much as a leader. Again, he got called out, rightfully so, for his actions at the end of that San Antonio Spurs game, was a little disengaged for a lot of that game, and then ended up leaving early. But then he responded, I think, very positively after that. He was way more engaged, way more communicative throughout the rest of the games. He was out there like speaking, even post-game, talking to the media and just showing that he is trying better to be a leader, being much more encouraging to his teammates. So I think just the future is so bright. And this is year 3 after what was quote-unquote a down year in his second year in the NBA. I think the sky's the limit for Scottie Barnes, and I think that we all have that to look forward to. So it'll be exciting. I think there's a lot of future promise there, but I think that pretty much wraps it up for our segment here. We're going to move on to our power rankings to talk a bit more about specific players. All right, now we are at our roster power rankings. Coty and I are going to discuss. We both made a power rankings list. We're going to go over mine, see where Coty's differ, and then kind of go back and forth based on that conversation. I do like to remind people that it is fluid. It goes week to week, which is why things may not look the same to you as it did the week before. But for me, in the number 1 spot, I have Emmanuel quickly bumping up from 3. RJ Barrett, he moves up from 3 to 2. Scottie Barnes, he's actually gone down. We'll talk about why for me. From the 1 spot, he's in 3. Jakob Poeltl in 4. 5 is Grady Dick. He's moved up. Kelly Olynyk is at 6. He's moved up as well. Gary Trent Jr. is at the 7th spot for me this week. He's gone down. Ochai Agbaji remains at 8. Bruce Brown is at 9. He's down from 7. Then we have Chris Boucher at 10, Jordan Nwora at 11, Javon Freeman-Liberty making his introduction to the roster power rankings at 12, Garrett Temple at 13, Jalen McDaniels at 14. A reminder, there is 1 open roster spot still that is available. And we have our 2 ways in DJ Carden, Marquise Nowell, and Jonte Porter. All right, Coty, let me know. Where do you agree and disagree?
How do you not have Scottie at 1? Like, I'm interested to hear this because for me, like, he's my 1. Like, I know he might be out for the rest of the year, like we talked about. I feel like he just got to be cemented at 1 now. And everyone's playing for 2nd, but I rate the Emmanuel quickly hype. But I'm interested to hear the Scottie Barnes argument here.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna be honest. It basically has everything to do with the injury. It's just the fact that he is he's hurt for a game and a half now in terms of these power rankings. And I will be a little biased. I wanted to see somebody else be in first spot. Like for a lot of the season, it was Pascal Siakam and Scottie Barnes. So seeing somebody new is a kind of a way of showing love. But it's kind of me projecting for the rest of the season. But yeah, 99% of it just has to do with the fact that the injury and that he didn't play for half that game against the Warriors. And then this game against the Hornets, he wasn't in for it as well. And it does also speak to like you talk about Emmanuel quickly and just the progression he's shown since the All-Star break. I think post All-Star break, he's been phenomenal. He's looked so much more comfortable as a guard. These past 4 games, like you mentioned earlier, he's averaging over 20 points, 7 assists, basically 6 rebounds, over a steal and a half a block. And I just think he's been very comfortable in terms of just being willing to operate as a modern day point guard, just looking to attack first, scoring, keeping that dribble alive as much as possible, using his speed. And then also just kind of finding opportunities to play make. He gets that. He becomes that threat as a pick and roll creator. And then he's willing to make those dump off passes out of the pick and roll, find people in the corners and just operate a lot more. And I'm starting to find he's getting a lot more like used to or comfortable with added attention for the most part. Against Charlotte late, he kind of faltered a little bit, but it was harder because it's a very different environment without Scottie Barnes being there, obviously. But he's drawing like 3, 4, 5 defenders at times when he's driving in now. And it just speaks to how much of a threat he's created for himself and how teams are kind of keying in on that. And he's rightfully finding people out of those situations. I think that's what he continues to do. Against Charlotte in that second half, when he was struggling a bit, I felt like he was trying to find our hunt shots rather than hunt advantages. And by that, I mean is like when he's using his speed to create an advantage and drawing in defenders, it doesn't necessarily mean he has to shoot. It can be an opportunity to play make and things like that. And he did that for a lot of this week. And it's kind of what I rewarded him for versus just trying to hunt and find your shots. That's not really necessarily being aggressive or being score first. That's being score hungry. I think there's a difference there. So I thought he's done that well for the most part this week. And just that compounded with the fact that Scottie's been hurt, I think was my reason for putting him in at 1. But yeah, I kind of was interested. Where, like, you already talked about it a bit, but Emmanuel quickly kind of bump here, like how much confidence you have in his game moving forward.
Yeah, I'm super confident, and it's just about he's gonna continue to grow, right? Like he's the number one option. He's top on the scouting reports for the most part, and we've already talked about some areas where he can improve on, where I'd like to see him improve on. I mean, he's launching it from 3, 7 attempts in 6 straight games. That's the longest stretch in his career. So it's, growing pains are going to be expected, but I'm honestly excited to see where this team goes with him with the lead. I also want to talk about Grady Dick. I feel like we've gone this far without talking about him, and he's been on a tear, Zulfi. He's been on a tear since coming back from this magic conditioning stint. That was on January 12th. Over 9 points, 1.5 assists, 2.5 rebounds, 46% from 3 on nearly 4 attempts per game. This is a far cry from what 2023 basically was for Grady. I mean, you properly have him at 5. That's where I would have him. He's been great since coming back up from that main 905 stint, and as us who get to cover the 905, I don't think we're going to be seeing him anymore this year, unfortunately for us, but he's been fantastic.
Yeah, look, over the last 4 games for this past week, 14 points on 60% from the field, 50% from 3, 3 rebounds, assist and a half, and less than a turnover a game. And he's just been so efficient out there when he's there, and he's doing so many of the little things. Like, those are stats of a guy who's just well on his way in the NBA. That's a solid role player, let alone a guy who's a rookie who had to go through a conditioning stint and was barely playing for half the season. So I think it's just a testament to how much work he's put in and how much confidence has made a difference to his game. And we talk about it every time, I end up having a conversation about Grady Dick, but there's always something new you're enjoying about his game. Whether it's his ability to play make and pass, whether it's how much he tries on defense and gives us his body. And recently, there's just been this appreciation for how much interest he has in rebounding the ball. The game against the Warriors, he was doing really well. And the game against the Hornets here, he had a couple really clutch rebounds towards the end of that game. And I saw a couple of tweets of people saying he has a knack for finding the ball and finding rebounds. And as a shooter, I'm sure he kind of watches how balls bounce off and he gets an idea for it. And I think it shows he has done so many of the little things, but it was harder to appreciate that early when you knew his main skill that he was brought in for was to be a knockdown shooter. But now he is one of the more consistent shooters on this team, and he is one of the better shooters in the league, quite frankly, over this stretch. From the corners, he basically is as money as you can get. It's not 100%, but it feels like it is when he's in the
over 60. Now. It's over 60%.
Yeah, it's over 60. So he has really put it together, and I'm curious how much more growth we can see down the stretch, because I think everyone can agree what we've seen so far after this recent stretch is enough for us to be satisfied for his rookie season. We kind of saw what he can do, we saw what he can create, but is there another step for these last 20 games, especially with Scottie Barnes out? Is it getting into the starting lineup and seeing what that looks like? Is it just commandeering this bench unit a little bit more and kind of having the scoring explosions? I'm hoping to see at least one Grady Dick heat check game where he can take over. There's been the comparisons made to a guy like Klay Thompson, even Kyle Korver and stuff like that. So can he get on a really hot shooting game? We saw against the Pelicans, he had a little bit of that, but it wasn't really just behind the 3-point line, just letting it fly. He was doing a bit of everything, which to his credit, he can do. But I kind of hope I can see one of those games from him this season, but I'm hopeful. I know it's super exciting for a lot of fans.
So someone I wanted to ask you about has been Bruce Brown. I mean, I feel like a lot of Raptors fans felt like he'd be better than what he has been. Seems like he's not really fitting in offensively, and I think a lot of Raptors fans would agree. He's either making the wrong read or taking too long to make the right read. This week specifically, 3.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists. He hasn't made a 3, Zulfi. He's 0 for 5, and he's 21.4% from the field. What have you made of Bruce Brown, man? I feel like it's hard to see him kind of being on this team any longer than the summer.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans, like you said, would agree with you. It's the part where he's trying to do too much. He's playing a bit more than he has to be. I keep saying, like, don't be more than you are. Like, we understand your abilities and the type of player that you are, and especially without a backup point guard lately, and him being put into this like playmaker facilitator role on the depth chart. I think he's been trying to do a bit more than he needs to do. This offense is predicated on quick ball movement, on getting things going with speed and efficiency, which is part of why like Pascal Siakam and Dennis Schroeder, they didn't fit necessarily into his offense as well as Darko's vision was, especially Dennis Schroeder, because he just like kept dribbling the ball too much, kept it in his own hands way too long for decisions to be made for the other guys who are moving and for timing and things to work. And Bruce Brown has had a bit of that lately. He's commandeering the offense more than he needs to. And I've made this point where, like, yes, it's easy to look like this complementary piece that can do a bit of everything, the Swiss Army knife, when you're playing next to Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, but it's different on this team. They don't need you to be that perfect Swiss Army knife. They need you to plug and play into this offense and be a guy who can fit in with what's going on around you. That's part of what Bruce Brown's value is in this league. Is like you're supposed to be able to fit in any offense and kind of add value how they need it added. And he's been trying to do more than that. He's trying to, I guess, show that he can do a bit of everything from playmaking to attacking to rebounding to defending. And it's just like causing a bit too much chaos from his perspective. And it's making him take longer with these decisions. And you're seeing these turnovers that are happening. A lot of them are hapless, either just like throwing the ball late off a guy cutting a certain position because he was looking at too many places first, getting that tunnel vision on some of these layups. And it's causing him to just not play the game at the speed that the team wants it to. And we know Bruce Brown is smarter than that. And I think maybe part of him is trying to up his trade value. Maybe the Raptors are, but at the end of the day, like none of this is helping any of that situation because teams are probably going to be interested in him because they know the type of player he is. But this isn't a good look for him. This isn't a good look for the development of this team. There's a lot of young guys who are trying to get minutes as well. They're trying to see what Jordan Warwick can do. And you saw against Charlotte Hornets, he was pretty productive with 11 points. But Bruce Brown is a valuable player in this league, so you want him out there. But when he's not really going with what the offense needs out of him, it really does feel like a missed opportunity for some of the other guys. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him down the stretch. But like as of late, he has been going down in these power rankings, and I think most fans can agree with that. It's just because like he's really not gelling with what's happening with the rest of the team. And he, by all accounts, he's a really good guy. He's a good teammate. But when he's trying to do more than he is, it's really not meshing with what's going on with this team's offense.
I mean, I can't not agree, right? I mean, Darko studied this guy, right? He said he was one of the best cutters in the league, if you remember when we acquired him in the Pascal Siakam trade. Yeah. And even stuff like that hasn't translated, right? So
when's the last time we've seen him cut? I don't think he cuts a lot now. He has the ball in his hands too often.
Yeah. We haven't even talked about him defensively. Like it's not even, like he hasn't even really made an impact on that end. He's been better on defense than offense, I would say, but just hasn't really, what I thought Bruce Brown would be to the Raptors. He hasn't really fit in Darko ball, which is kind of like surprising.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Yeah, he hasn't fit into Darko ball, but the interesting part is Darko has really gone back to him quite a bit. Like he's been inserted into starting lineup quite often. He's usually one of the first subs off the bench. He's there in closing situations quite a bit. Darko really does like to use him and his versatility. But when he's out there, just the impact hasn't really been felt. I guess how fans wanted it to happen. But for some reason, Darko seems to see something there that he's providing value in some regards. So it'll be interesting down the stretch. If this does continue, will Darko eventually pull the cord and just be like, you know what, it was interesting, we tried it, and now we're going to go to the young guys? Or is he going to continue this because he sees there's something out there to be gained? So we'll see what happens there. The next guy I wanted to kind of have a conversation about was R905 guy, the new Raptor, who's off a two-way on a standard contract, Javon Freeman Liberty. As I see here, both of us agreed that his introduction onto this list is at the 12th spot. And I'm interested to hear from you kind of like what you hope to see from him out of an opportunity. So far, there hasn't been much, and we can talk about maybe why that is. But like, let me know about Javon. I know we've talked about him before, but remind some people about why you're in this.
Yeah, interestingly, DJ Carton got a lot of run against Charlotte, kind of playing over Javon Freeman Liberty for these backup point guard spots. But first of all, congratulations to Javon on getting a standard multi-year deal. I mean, this guy was tearing it up with the 905, 24 points, nearly 7 rebounds, 4.5 assists for the 905, and 6'4" combo guard who gets to the paint with ease, Zulfi. I mean, you know this just as well as I. Uses his speed, change of pace, explosive quick bursts, he gets to the paint and finishes at the rim like it's nothing. And you've mentioned this before. The 3-point shot is starting to come along for him. About an average 3-point shooter. Doesn't really do too much off the dribble 3-point shooting wise, but if he has an open look, he is fully confident and not afraid to take it.
Oh yeah.
Defensively, defensively as well. Really good point of attack defender in the G League so far this season. We mentioned the quickness, like he's really good at staying in front of defenders, really quick feet. His angles he takes on defense and the way he fights around screens is something I've noted that has been great. I'd love to see him get more of a shot. I've wrote over 2,000 words on this guy. I'm the biggest Javon Freeman Liberty guy at Raptors Republic, it seems. So I really want to see him getting a shot. Kind of shocked that DJ Carton got I don't know how many minutes he got against Charlotte, but it was a decent amount. Like we mentioned, he was in the first quarter. So it will be interesting to see if Javon Freeman Liberty eventually gets a shot.
Yeah, like I think you mentioned it, that obviously the offense has been impressive. He was the G League Player of the Week recently, averaging over like 30 over the past week, I think, or something insane like that. And I defensively, I agree with you that he's a great point of attack defender. What I've noticed watching him a lot is he has very active hands. He will get into traffic down under the basket and just use his hands as much as possible.
6'9" wingspan too. 6'9" doesn't help or doesn't hurt.
It definitely makes a difference. He has that like that Fred VanVleet quality, Kyle Lowry quality, where he'll like get down and dirty and just like swipe balls out. And I think that's very good in terms of having out of that guard spot. I guess for him, like, if I had to guess why maybe he hasn't gotten that opportunity, he is a combo guard, you've mentioned, and he's developed quite a ways as a playmaker or as an offensive initiator, but maybe it's not to the point where a DJ Carton is in terms of just being able to facilitate an offense. He's excelled quite honestly more as being like that guy who can just like punch and square up offense. Again, a very RJ Barrett-esque in a regard where he creates offensively versus like, again, a DJ Carton is maybe more akin to like an Emmanuel Quickley in some sense in terms of playmaking. So I guess maybe that's where the differentiation's happening, and Darko has to see more of him in terms of being able to like operate an offense. So we'll see if that comes. I do agree with you that I think he does deserve an opportunity, especially given all these injuries down the stretch and trying to see stuff happen. I don't want it to be like you've kind of rewarded him with this standard contract and we're going to figure it out next season. I think this is a great opportunity down the stretch here in the season to see what he has to offer. And whenever he's come in, he's brought in tons of energy. I know you mentioned it in your piece with Raptors Republic, like in the preseason against the Cairns Taipans, he was the Raptors' leading scorer. He didn't see the opportunity as like it's a preseason game. Oh, I'm just getting in because they don't want to play any of their guys. He took it seriously and he came out and showed it. And I think throughout the doldrums of the end of season, these last 21 games, if there's anything this Raptors team does need on a consistent basis, it's energy. Part of why they talk about bringing Chris Boucher back into the rotation is because he's consistent with one thing more than anything, and that's energy and effort. And we both know Javon Freeman Liberty is always bringing in energy and effort. He always has that. And if you can add that into his rotation, if you can inject a bit of that, I'll never say no to it. So I'm interested to see what happens with it, and hopefully he gets more of an opportunity with that.
Super great kid too. Just like great head on his shoulders, like seems to know what he needs to do to continue to be at this level. And we're kind of comparing him to DJ Carton. I don't want to like go against DJ Carton because I actually like DJ Carton as well. He had in the minutes he had, I liked his minutes. I mean, he was diving all over the floor. He forced a 8-second violation on Charlotte. I also remember he dived for a rebound, tipped it over to RJ Barrett, who drained a 3. I mean, DJ Carton's not letting go of this spot, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that DJ Carton's more of a pure point, if you want to say. Javon Freeman Liberty more of like a 2 guard. So I think you're right in that assessment. We'll see if I hope he's able to find some run. Darko is for Javon Freeman Liberty over these last 20 games because he's had a monster year in the G League and, like you said, deserves a shot.
Yeah, down the stretch, I thought like coming into the year, or at least after the All-Star break, we might have known most of what we know about this Raptors team. But given these injuries, given the up and down nature of what's about to happen for these last couple of games, I think there's a lot of questions still left to be answered. And one of them is going to be, does Javon Freeman Liberty get an opportunity? What does it look like? You kind of brought it up. That 2 guard spot is more where he may naturally fit, and there's obviously a lot of competition there right now. You have Gary, you have Grady. There's still Jordan Wara somewhere in that mix. but can he kind of compete with DJ Carden for that backup point guard spot, at least to some degree? And I think competition's good, so it will be good to see. But I think that pretty much wraps it up for our power ranking. We are now going to move on to betting ahead. All right, now it's time for betting ahead, powered by FanDuel. I'll be filling in for Kyle this week. Hopefully I can do the segment some justice, but let's see. We're going to start by looking at the schedule like always, and things won't be particularly easy for the Dinos as they take on the Pelicans at home before hitting the road to face the Suns and then the Trailblazers. You're going to have Denver after that too next Monday, so that won't be easy. But looking at money line picks, I think I have to play it smart and take the Pelicans to start. Jakob Poeltl isn't available for this game as of the latest injury report, so that's no Barnes, Brown, and Poeltl against a very big Pelican squad. The last time these teams played, the Pels waxed the Raptors 138-100, one of the worst losses in franchise history. And Ingram just torched Toronto, 41 points, hit 5 threes in a row at one point. So I'm not sure who on this team can really limit him, especially without Barnes or Bruce Brown there. And without a fully healthy squad, and given the size and defense that New Orleans really does have to offer both inside and on the perimeter, I think this is going to be a tough L for Toronto, unfortunately. Now we go look at the Suns on the road. I personally think this is going to be a closer game than some may feel. The Raptors' health obviously being a major swing factor for this game, but the Suns are reeling a little bit. They've lost 2 games in a row before taking on the Denver Nuggets before facing the Raptors, which is obviously going to be a tough matchup. And Devin Booker may be less than 100%. He recently tweaked his ankle in that weird collision that also involved Royce O'Neal. So who knows what that's going to lead to in terms of injury repercussions. And low-key, I don't see a ton of great depth for the Suns on the bench defensively. So I feel like, I don't know, I just have a gut feeling this could be a really good Grady Dick game coming off the bench. Find that energy because he can just move around a lot. I think he'll have a lot of freedom to get to his spots, especially if people can find him. So I'm looking forward to possibly a big Grady Dick game in this. But however, I think at the end of the day, Phoenix does just have a bit more firepower than the less than full strength Raptors. You obviously have KD, Beal, and then even possibly Booker in that mix if he is healthy. And that is a lot for the team to handle that already wasn't the best defensively. And now without some of their best defenders, especially in Scottie Barnes, I think it will be a tough matchup for them. And then there's also Yusuf Nurkic, which I haven't even got through. He's coming off a massive 31 rebound game, setting the franchise record for rebounds in a game. And with the potential of Jakob Poeltl might not being there, I think it will be a huge problem for the Raptors if Nurkic is out there a lot. So at the end of that, give me the Suns money line at home. But I think the Raptors can keep this closer. They've played them well before in the past. I know obviously the team was a bit different, but I have hope for the Raptors to keep it close at least. Now that leaves us the Trailblazers game, which will also be at home for them. And I'm going to take the Raptors money line here. I think the Blazers are a scrappy team. They've won 2 in a row before taking on the Wolves, which is probably going to be a loss for them and a tough matchup. But those wins were against the Skeleton Crew Grizzlies team, so I don't put too much stock in that. And one of them was in overtime. So especially considering that before that 2 games, they were on a 9-game losing streak. So I don't really see too much stock in the Trailblazers kind of figuring it out at this point. So I think that's a big part of it. And also Portland did beat the Raptors early in the season, and it was a bit of a punking, to be quite honest. I'm hoping the Raptors come out with a bit of a revenge factor. And I think on a matchup level, like Emmanuel Cookman and RJ Barrett should have pretty favorable matchups. You might have Brogdon out there, who I don't know can keep up with the speed of these players, or Scoot Henderson maybe. Anthony Simons is an interesting prospect, but I think Emmanuel Cookman should be able to match up with him pretty favorably. Neither are really known as like fantastic defenders, so I think it should even out. And I think Kelly Olynyk is a guy who's going to be able to maneuver really well against the bigs of Portland. I don't think they can really limit him, especially in terms of his secondary creation and what he can offer there. So I think he'll have a good game. And then obviously Poeltl being another swing factor in this. But I think similar to the Charlotte game, the Raptors just on paper have the talent to snag a dub in this one. And they just have to play up to the expectations and not play down to the level of Portland, which I think they'll do. So I'll take the Raptors money line in this game. And kind of going off of that, I want to talk about a same game parlay that I think people would consider. I'm going to consider it, obviously. I'm looking at the Raptors versus the Pelicans, and here's what I got for you guys to take a look at. Keeping it real simple. Give me Brandon Ingram 20 plus points. He's hit over 20 in his last 4 games. He's at 30 in back-to-back games. Already mentioned he torched the Raptors for 41 last time. And I don't really know who on Toronto can guard him and limit him, especially if you have a guy like Zion Williamson also out there kind of doing his thing. So I might even consider pushing that to 25 if you're feeling bold, but I think 20 is a pretty safe bet, part of a parlay. And moving on to Jonas Valanciunas, 8+ rebounds. Like the big Lithuanian grabbed 12 boards against the Raptors last time. He's averaged 9.5 this season. And with no Yak in this game, I think it'll be really easy for him to feast when it's time on the floor, because I think they're going to be pushing the ball out for the other guys. So there might not be too many other players on New Orleans competing against him for those rebounds. I wouldn't personally push it to 10 plus just because there is that risk of this game going to small ball. If the Raptors start hitting their shots from perimeter and really taking advantage of a small ball lineup, I can see New Orleans matching that by putting Zion or Ingram at the 5 and seeing what that looks like. So that may push JV out of this game, which is why I wouldn't risk pushing 10. I think 8 plus is a safe bet. And lastly, quickly, 3 plus made threes. Look, the reality is with how much paint size the Pelicans have and given quickly struggle getting to the rack at times, especially with bigger guards around. I don't think it's something where he's going to try to like really force the issue. I think he'll rely on that outside shot more, which you've seen in recent games. He's really going to try to set the tone with that 3-point shooting. Now, without Yak, that might be challenging, but Kelly is a great pick and roll partner as well. And Kelly does offer IQ, that ability to work off ball to get some of his 3-point looks too. So he's hit 3 or more threes in 5 of the Raptors' last 6 games. He's averaging 9.4 attempts over their last 5. So I expect to let him to let it fly and really start shooting, like I said, setting the tone with that. And Emmanuel quickly also had a pretty quiet game against the Pelicans last time. He finished with just 8 points, 1 of 3 shooting from downtown, which I don't think he will allow to happen in a game like this again. Just 3 attempts probably just way below his expectation at this point. So I really do expect him to have a big bounce back effort. Alternatively, you could look at the scoring, 15 or 20 plus points if you want to, but I think 3-point attempts, or the made threes rather, is a pretty safe bet just because it's a point of emphasis for him lately, and it really does open up the game once he starts hitting that. So to recap, I'll go Ingram 20 plus points, JV 8 plus rebounds, and quickly 3 plus made threes for a same game parlay between the Raptors and the New Orleans Pelicans. And that pretty much wraps it up. That was Betting Ahead powered by FanDuel. All right, now that does it for us. We want to thank anyone who followed along. We hope you're caught up on all things in Raptors land. If you like this and want more content from us at Raptors Republic, check out the description or go to raptorsrepublic.com. Please like, share, and subscribe. The usual, comment on online. If you have any feedback for us, let us know what you think. And tell us if you loved it, hate it. We want to know everything. The season's coming to an end, but I feel like we've been trying our best to adapt as we go. And it's been awesome to kind of get your feedback along the way. Once again, I want to thank Cody Wiles for joining us, filling in for Kyle. We hope he's enjoying his vacation. But Cody, thank you so much for being here and taking part in Run It Back. Is there anything you want to say to the people? Let them know where you're at.
Hey, at Cody Wild Sports on Twitter. Hopefully I did my best Kyle impression. Can't grow as nice of a beard as Kyle, but hopefully I tried to provide as much as great NBA content as Kyle does. Thanks again for having me on.
I think you filled in honorably. We're excited to have Kyle back in the future, but anytime you're welcome here, Cody. But that does it for us. I'm Zulfi Sheikh on the Raptors Republic Network. We will see you next week where we run it back.